road was hungry. I could feel it under my wheels. US Route 491. The Old Devil's Highway, cutting through the vast and empty New Mexico desert like a black, unstitched wound. I'd been driving rigs for almost 15 years, but I never took this route unless I had to. Tonight, I had to. A last-minute job hauling steel pipes from Gallup to Monticello, Utah. The load was heavy, the route desolate, and the deadline tight. The dispatcher's warning had stuck with me. Drive fast, don't stop, and whatever you do, don't pick anyone up. I had laughed at that. Who the hell would be out here in the middle of the night? But now, as my rig cut through the darkness, my fingers were tight on the wheel, and my gut was telling me something was wrong. The sky was ink black. No moon, no stars, just an endless void that the road seemed to bleed into. Then I saw it. A figure standing on the shoulder of the highway, just outside the reach of my headlights. I barely had time to register the details. Tall, human-shaped, but something about it was wrong. The limbs seemed too long, the stance too still. My chest clenched as I sped past, catching only a glimpse in my side mirror. It hadn't moved, not an inch. I swallowed hard, telling myself it was just a trick of the eyes, the long hours messing with my head. But my skin was crawling. I turned the radio on to drown out the silence. Static. I twisted the dial, searching for anything. Music, talk radio, even an emergency broadcast. Nothing. The road stretched ahead, unbroken, infinite. But as I checked my mirrors again, my stomach turned to ice. The figure was still there. Same distance behind me. Exactly the same. I pushed the gas harder, the hum of my engine swallowing the fear rising in my throat. I didn't look back again. I didn't need to. I passed through Shiprock an hour later, the jagged silhouette of the sacred rock formation barely visible in the gloom. There was something about that place, about this whole stretch of road, that felt ancient, older than asphalt, older than history. I kept the truck at a steady 65, resisting the urge to push faster. I knew better. These roads had their own rules. And then I saw it. Another figure, standing at the side of the road just outside my headlights. Identical, tall, still, watching. My throat tightened. It was impossible. I hadn't made any turns, hadn't looped back. I had not passed the same place twice. Yet there it was. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white. I wasn't a superstitious man, but I'd heard stories from other truckers, whispers about something on this road, figures that watched, that waited. And one rule that every driver swore by: don't stop, don't look at them for too long, and for God's sake, don't let them in. I forced my eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge the thing in my periphery. I wasn't going to break the rule. For a while I thought I'd lost it. The figure, the feeling. I tried to convince myself it had been a trick of exhaustion, the road playing with my mind. Then I heard it. A soft click, like a door unlocking. My heart stopped. I glanced at my passenger seat. It wasn't empty anymore. There was someone there. I couldn't see their face, not fully, just the outline in the dim glow of the dashboard. A head tilted too far forward, arms resting in their lap, completely still. My breath came in shallow gasps. I hadn't stopped. I hadn't let anyone in. So how were they here? The air in the cab was wrong, too cold, like I'd opened a freezer. The smell hit me next, thick and wet, like rust and something older. My hands trembled on the wheel. I swallowed, forcing my voice to work. "Who are you?" I whispered. The figure didn't move, but the air shifted. A sound, soft, wet breathing. Then it spoke. "Keep driving." My stomach twisted. The voice was wrong, too deep, layered, like two voices speaking at once. I kept my eyes on the road. My pulse thundered in my ears. I didn't know the rules for this. Then the radio crackled. A voice cut through the static, urgent and low. "Driver on 491. Do not acknowledge the passenger. Do not respond. Do not..." Silence. The figure shifted slightly. I clenched my teeth, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. I wasn't going to break the rule. I drove and drove. The highway stretched forever, an endless strip of asphalt cutting through the dark. The miles should have been adding up. I should have been nearing Monticello by now, but the road just kept going. I checked the GPS. The screen was frozen. The time read 2:17 a.m. I checked my phone. Same time. Neither had changed in over an hour. The figure in the passenger seat didn't move, didn't breathe, but I felt it watching. The weight of its presence pressed against me like a cold hand on my back. Don't acknowledge it. Don't respond. I repeated the words like a prayer, my foot pressing the gas harder. My rig roared forward, but the landscape refused to change. It was as if I wasn't moving at all. Then, in the distance, I saw lights. An exit. Relief flooded my chest. I didn't care where it led. I just needed off this road. I signaled, watching the ramp approach, ready to take it. And then it was gone. Vanished. Like it had never been there. My stomach twisted. I kept driving. Minutes later, the lights appeared again. A different exit, a different sign. This time, I didn't hesitate. I yanked the wheel hard, turning onto the ramp. And suddenly, I was back on 491, as if I had never turned at all. The figure in the seat beside me shifted. The radio crackled again, the same voice from before whispering through the static.
"Driver, there is no exit. Keep going. Do not let it know you see it."
I bit back a scream. No exit, no way off. The realization sank into my bones like ice. I was trapped. I don't know how long I drove. Time had lost meaning. The figure beside me never moved, never spoke again. It was just there, a heavy presence pressing against reality itself. Then, without thinking, I made a mistake. I looked, really looked, and I saw its face. It wasn't a face at all, just a hole, a gaping, endless void where a face should be, pulling at the edges of reality like a black hole, swallowing the light from the dashboard, from the road, from me. The second I saw it, I felt something tear, inside my head, inside my soul. A force slammed into my chest, like icy hands digging into my ribs. My vision blurred, my ears rang with a deep, guttural sound, laughter maybe, or screaming. The truck swerved violently. My vision flickered between two realities, one where I was on the highway, my hands locked on the wheel, and another, a road that wasn't a road, a place that wasn't a place, a vast and endless nothing, stretching beyond time, filled with shifting, watching figures, tall, still, waiting. I felt myself slipping, my grip on reality fracturing. Then suddenly, a horn, bright headlights flooding my mirrors, a truck behind me, another driver. A deafening beep shattered the suffocating silence, yanking me back. My hands jerked the wheel and I swerved hard, nearly jackknifing the rig. And just like that, it was gone. The figure, the void, the impossible road. I was back on 491. Dawn was breaking. The clock on my dash read 6:47 a.m. Somehow I had lost 4 hours. The other truck roared past me, its driver staring wide-eyed through his window. He knew. He had seen it too. By the time I reached Monticello, my hands were still shaking. I parked the rig at the drop-off point, stepped out on unsteady legs, and lit a cigarette with numb fingers. A veteran trucker stood nearby, watching me. He nodded toward my rig. "You drove 491 last night, didn't you?" I swallowed. "Yeah." He sighed, shaking his head. "You see them?" I hesitated, then I nodded. He took a long drag of his cigarette, exhaling slowly. "You're lucky. Most don't come back when they really look at them." I wanted to ask what he meant, but I already knew. I never took Route 491 again, and I never, ever drive at night. I wasn't supposed to take the job. The dispatcher had called last minute, asking if I could run a load from Nogales up to Denver. No questions, just cash. I was already dead tired, but the money was good, too good. That should have been my first warning. The warehouse sat on the outskirts of town, past a stretch of empty desert and barbed wire fences. No company logos, no signs. Just a single security light buzzing against the night. A man in a dark jacket met me at the gate, handed me a clipboard. No names, no explanations. "What's in the trailer?" I asked, signing the manifest. He stared at me. "Not your concern." I almost walked then. Should have. But money's money, and I'd hauled stranger loads before. Still, as I hooked up the trailer, I noticed the weight. It was heavy. Too heavy for what the paperwork claimed. That was my second warning. I got on I-19, pushing north through the desert. The road was empty, just the occasional set of headlights miles behind. Somewhere past Tucson, I heard it. A dull thud from inside the trailer, then another. I adjusted my mirror, glancing at the dark, silent box behind me. Maybe a shift in the load. Maybe bad securing. But then, a third thud. And this time, it didn't stop. I pulled into an empty truck stop, heart hammering. The parking lot was deserted, just a flickering neon open sign buzzing in the distance. I stepped out, flashlight in hand, and walked to the back of the trailer. The lock was still in place, but the metal around it was scratched. Not just scratches, gouges, like something had clawed at it from the inside. A sick feeling coiled in my stomach. I wasn't hauling cargo. I was hauling someone. I pressed my ear to the metal. Silence. Then a whisper. Low. Hoarse. Desperate. "Help me!" I stumbled back, heart pounding. My mind raced. What the hell was I mixed up in? Human trafficking? Some cartel job no one had warned me about? I should have called the cops. Should have driven straight to a station, let them handle it. Instead, I did something stupider. I reached for the lock. A car pulled into the lot. Black sedan. Tinted windows. No plates. They must have been tailing me, waiting for me to stop. Driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, clean-cut. Suit that didn't fit the desert. Not a trucker. Not a cop. I took a step back. He smiled. "You need to keep driving," he said. I glanced at the trailer, at the deep scratches around the lock. "What's in there?" I asked. The man sighed, like he was disappointed. "Not your concern." That same line. Like the guy at the warehouse, like they were reading off a script. I squared my shoulders. Not good enough. His expression didn't change, but something in his stance did. A slight shift of weight. A readiness. I'd been on the road long enough to recognize it. I wasn't getting out of here unless I complied. Or fought. I glanced around. The truck stop was empty. No witnesses. No backup. I needed an edge, so I played dumb. "Fine," I muttered, raising my hands. "I'll drive." The man nodded, satisfied, and turned back toward his car. That's when I moved. I grabbed the crowbar from my cab and swung it hard. It connected with his ribs. He dropped, gasping, but I didn't wait to see if he'd recover. I ran to the trailer and ripped the lock off. The doors swung open. At first, all I saw was darkness. Then a figure stumbled forward, thin, ragged, covered in dried blood. A woman, maybe 25, hands bound, eyes wide with something worse than fear. "Please," she gasped, "he's coming." I turned back toward the sedan. The driver was already standing, and he wasn't alone. 2 more black cars pulled in, doors opened. More men, too many. I grabbed the woman's arm and yanked her toward the cab. "Get in." She didn't hesitate. I floored it before her door even closed. The black cars followed. They were fast. Faster than I expected. I pushed the truck harder, ignoring the shaking frame, the weight of the load dragging me down. The woman was curled in the seat, shaking. "They won't stop," she whispered. I checked the mirror. The black cars were gaining. No cops, no other vehicles. Just endless desert and the road stretching ahead. No exits in sight. Then I saw it. A rail crossing. And the blinking red lights of an approaching train. I had 2 choices. Stop and let them surround me, or gun it and pray. I gunned it. The truck roared forward. The crossing arms started to lower. The train's horn blasted. I clenched my jaw. Come on, come on. The tires hit the tracks. The train's light filled my vision. Then, we were through. The train slammed past behind us, steel screaming against steel. The black cars never made it. I didn't stop until we hit El Paso, pulled into a crowded truck stop, parked between 2 rigs. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then finally I turned to her. Who were they? Her hands were still shaking. I don't know, she whispered. But I wasn't the first. I let that sink in. Then I handed her my phone. Call someone, whoever you trust. She hesitated, then nodded. I stepped out, letting the cool night air settle over me. The horizon was already turning pink with the first traces of dawn, and for the first time all night, the road was empty. I wasn't new to bad decisions. Hauling freight is a lonely job, and sometimes that loneliness makes you say yes to things you shouldn't. A last-minute load with cash under the table? Not my worst idea. I was sitting in a dusty truck stop outside of Raton, New Mexico, killing time before my next legit job, when a man approached me in the lot. Late 50s, sunburned, wearing a grease-stained jacket too warm for the desert heat. You owner-operator? He asked. Yeah. I got a load needs hauling. Pays $5,000 cash. $5,000 for one trip? No paperwork, no questions. I should have walked away. But I was down on money, and my rig wasn't going to fix itself. What's the cargo? He scratched his chin, looking toward a battered, unmarked trailer parked near the back of the lot. Just a delivery for a friend. No hazmat, no drugs. Just needs to be in Kansas City by sunrise. A 10-hour drive. $5,000. I nodded. Book me up. I backed my truck up to the trailer, locked it in, and he handed me an envelope of cash. Just one thing, he said, looking serious now. No stops. No opening the trailer, no matter what. I let out a dry chuckle. That sounds shady as hell. Doesn't matter. Just drive. I don't know why I agreed. Maybe it was the money. Maybe it was boredom. But I put the truck in gear and rolled out onto I-25, heading north into the night. The trailer was heavier than I expected. And 2 hours later, something inside started knocking. It wasn't a mechanical noise. It wasn't the road. It was rhythmic, deliberate. A slow, steady thump against the inside of the trailer walls. I checked my mirrors. The highway was empty. No lights behind me, just the stretch of road cutting through the darkness. The knocking stopped. I exhaled, gripping the wheel tighter. My brain was trying to rationalize it. Maybe something had shifted. Maybe it was bad packing. Maybe... Thump. Louder this time. I swallowed hard. My gut told me to pull over, check the load. But his words echoed in my head. No stops, no opening the trailer. I kept driving. It was past 2 a.m. when I saw the lights. Blue and red flashing in my mirror. Shit. I pulled onto the shoulder, heart hammering. A state trooper climbed out of the cruiser, adjusting his belt. He took his time walking up to my window, shining his flashlight inside. License and registration, he said. I handed them over. What's the problem, officer? You were swerving back there. Everything all right? Yeah, just a long drive. He studied me for a long moment. Then his eyes flicked toward the trailer. What are you hauling? I hesitated. Just freight. The trooper stepped back, angling his flashlight toward the back of my truck. Pop the trailer. My stomach clenched. I don't have the keys. I lied. His hand rested on his holster. Step out of the truck. Then the knocking started again. Louder, more frantic. His eyes locked on mine. What the hell is that? I was about to answer when the trailer door slammed from the inside, hard enough to rattle the whole truck. The trooper unlatched his gun. Stay put. He walked to the back of the trailer, reaching for the handle. I wanted to tell him not to. I wanted to tell him to leave it alone. But he yanked the door open, and the thing inside lunged. I didn't see much. Just movement. Just the blur of something huge and fast. The trooper barely had time to scream. Then he was gone. Ripped into the trailer like a rag doll, his flashlight spinning into the dirt. The door slammed shut, and the knocking stopped. I don't remember shifting into gear. I don't remember flooring it back onto the highway. All I remember is the fear. The road blurred under my headlights. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. I needed to dump the trailer, unhook it, leave it on the side of the road. But my hands wouldn't move. My foot wouldn't ease off the gas. The truck wasn't mine anymore. Kansas City was 6 hours away. I drove the whole way without stopping. I don't know what was in the trailer. I don't know who it was for. But when I pulled into an abandoned warehouse lot outside the city, a black SUV was already waiting. A man stepped out, dressed in a clean suit, face unreadable. He checked his watch. "You made good time." I barely managed to speak. "What the hell is in there?" He smiled. "You don't want to know." And then just like that, he handed me another envelope. 10 grand this time. "Leave," he said. "Forget this job ever happened." I did. I took the money. I got in my truck, and I drove. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about that trooper. I still think about that knocking, and I wonder, did I just deliver something? Or did I set it free?